having the picks is not good enough. You have to hit on them. So this is why, I trust Adam Peters to go trade picks for Myles Garrett, because I also trust Adam Peters to use the picks that he has well. Everything the smart people, not everything everyone says, everything the smart people say about Jalen Hurts is true. But that doesn't make him any less of a player. And that's something we should collectively unpack to be smarter about football. That's something that anybody who criticizes him or points out flaws in his game, if they are indeed a smart person, is reckoning with today to understand the value of certain skill sets within the context of the NFL. Hurts is not an elite processor. He's not a twitchy thrower in the way that Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes are, where the ball just flies out of his hand quickly, like catch, throw, get it out. That's not who Jalen Hurts is. But he's now a Super Bowl MVP and a Super Bowl champion. So what do we make of that? Because what he is someone who is supremely accurate. That is the thing that since Jalen Hurts was at Alabama, nevertheless Oklahoma, or even in his rookie year in the NFL, or his ascent in 2022, like all of it. He has always been an extremely accurate thrower and especially an extremely accurate downhill thrower. And the value of the deep ball in the NFL is still something that I think is really underappreciated by a lot of people. A lot of people love this dink and dunk, throw it over the middle, your tight end, 7-yard gain. Oh, let me hit this dig route for 12 yards. Okay, cool. You dink and dunk your way out down the field. I'll take Jalen Hurts throwing go balls. We'll go 40 yards at a time, 50 yards at a time. And so he is very smart when it comes about when to throw, where to throw, deep balls down. And then he's also an elite competitor. And that comes out in multiple ways. It comes out in his knack for making the big play, rising to the biggest moments. Also, he is incredibly even-keeled, which is an enormous trait for a quarterback to have, especially on that team where there are all kinds of different personalities that he is managing at all times. And he is just a steady person in the middle of that storm, and he is the one that guided them to this championship.
Number 5.
The one thing the Chiefs did well yesterday was stop Saquon Barkley, much to my chagrin because I had Saquon as an anytime touchdown scorer in this game. Whoopsie daisies on that one. But they sold out to sell Saquon. The problem is that then left them exposed on the back end. And at the end of the day, hey, we got to make Jalen Hurts beat us. Well, he did. And congrats to the Chiefs on having arguably one of the best days of Saquon against Saquon all year. Congratulations to Saquon for winning the Super Bowl.
Number 6.
Milton Williams and Josh Sweat both probably played their final game in green yesterday. Something that if you're a Washington fan, you're like, thank God. Sweat has been sensational for years for Philly. Williams is going to get paid a ton of money, and very simply, Philly cannot afford. I mean, they are as good as anybody at making the cap stuff work, but they can't pay him and then pay Jalen Carter in a couple years with all the guys they're already paying. Like Bond was on, I'm pretty sure, a 1-year deal. He's going to need to get paid. So there's just a lot of things that are going to happen for Philly this offseason, and Milton Williams and Josh Sweat are probably two guys that are going to be on the outs because they're going to want to go get paid somewhere. Sweat is certainly on my list for Washington. Williams, frankly, depending on what happens with Allen and Payne, could be on my list for Washington as well. Just a tremendous output from both those guys. The strip sacks for Williams. Sweat was everywhere. Like, those two guys cemented themselves as guys that will never have to buy a beer or a cheesesteak in Philadelphia ever again with how they played yesterday, even though they then are probably going to play somewhere else next season.
Number 7.
That is the worst game I've seen Patrick Mahomes play in a long time, if not ever. Like, truly, possibly his worst game. I know people like to point to that Tampa Bay game in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Patrick Mahomes in that Tampa game was outrageously good. The circumstances around him were so outrageously bad that it wasn't really that competitive. But like Mahomes in that game, I mean, think about that play that he made where he rolled out and was diving, getting tackled, and threw a submarine ball where his knuckles dragged the ground, and he hit Tyreek Hill in the face mask between two guys down the field. That wasn't yesterday. This was a Patrick Mahomes whose feet were all over the place, whose eyes were all over the place, who truly had no control over that game because of how well Philly was doing and crumbling circumstances around him. So while Mahomes was playing bad, he actually wasn't near the top of the list of the problems for Kansas City.
Number 8.
Top of that list was probably their offensive line, and the decision to move Joe Thuney outside worked until it really didn't. It took a strength for Kansas City, the interior of their O-line, and made it average, and it didn't really make anything else a strength. Thuney was outmatched at left tackle yesterday, and they should have probably, in hindsight, made a switch there. If they do it at halftime, I mean, at that point, it's probably already too late. But it happens. It's too late because Thuney gets bowled back into Mahomes, who throws the pick to Bond that ends that drive and ultimately turns a chance for Kansas City to double up and make it a one-score game coming out of halftime if they can double up, end of first half, start of second, to a 24-0 deficit at halftime. Just a really, really poor performance by Kansas City's offensive line, enhanced by the fact that the Eagles have arguably the best defensive line in the sport.
Number 9.
One thing you can do to mitigate that is use the RPO game. They did that on the first drive for one play, and I don't know that they ran an RPO for the rest of the day. I think Washington showed the formula of how you can beat Philadelphia. I actually think that we'll talk about the Commanders obviously more as we go today and what they did against Philly and trying to add the context of like, oh, wow, that was the Super Bowl champions. But the RPO game that Cliff and Jalen deployed was a way to move the football against this Eagles defense because you have these incredible players in DeJean and Bond on the insides, and you need to find a way to put them in conflict. And Kansas City just didn't, which is weird because they've used RPOs a ton in the playoffs when their numbers have been way better from an efficiency standpoint. Bizarre choice by Andy Reid, who is obviously one of the greatest coaches in the history of the league, but I don't know that there was a game plan for Kansas City that was going to work yesterday against Philly, but that sure as hell wasn't it.
Number 10.
Last thing, biggest takeaway. Draft well or bust. And that does not mean that you can't go make big trades. And so before anyone's like, well, you said the Commanders should go get Myles Garrett. Yeah, they should. Just like the Eagles went and got A.J. Brown. And you can go make big splash moves in free agency. But whether you give up a couple of draft picks to go do that, or you keep all yours and just purely build through the draft, if you do not hit on your picks, you are not going to be a champion in this league. And the difference in many ways yesterday is guys like Mitchell, DeJean, Carter, etc. played incredible ball for Philly, while there are holes at, for instance, left tackle for the Chiefs because 2 years in a row they have missed on trying to address that in the draft. Having the picks is not good enough. You have to hit on them. So this is why, I trust Adam Peters to go trade picks for Myles Garrett because I also trust Adam Peters to use the picks that he has well. You have got to hit. And if you hit at the rate that Philly hits, you can build the best roster in the league. If you hit it the way Kansas City had hit for the 5 years prior to the last two, you can go back-to-back champs in the Super Bowl. You miss on a couple, and those are, you start to lose guys in free agency, and you need to replace them, and you miss. That is how you fall off from what Kansas City was to what Kansas City is, which is a team that failed for the first time in 3 years to win the Lombardi Trophy.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.